cross-culture connection, Dr. Wachter guides organizations and individuals in forging meaningful connections across cultures, driving change, and sustainable growth. Without further ado, I bring you Dr. Kristina Wachter.
Okay, don't get too comfortable right now. I want you to assume a persona. I want you to think of a place that you've never lived, but you're interested in living. This is better. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm quite loud. I wear hearing aids, by the way, so if I've been talking to you today and giving you the wrong answer, it's because I didn't hear it properly. Okay, so anyway, back to assuming the persona. What I want you to do right now is think of a place that you would like to live. And, make it as different from the place where you currently live as possible. Hopefully with another language that is spoken there that's not your primary language. But that's not a necessity. What is a necessity is that you assume a persona of someone from a different demographic. So it can be anything, age, gender, something like that, socioeconomic status. Assume that position. Do you have your avatars? Okay, so now what I want you to do is get up and go around, and I want you to talk to someone that you have not yet spoken to today and introduce yourself using that persona. And then I want the person to guess where you're from and what your demographic is, how old you are, or whatever. So go, you've got 2 minutes, go. Go, you gotta go fast. You gotta go fast. Okay, 30 seconds. 30 seconds to wrap it up. Okay, now politely say goodbye to that persona. Say goodbye to that persona. Say goodbye. Say goodbye using the persona. Say goodbye to that persona. So say goodbye to your new friends. Yeah, say goodbye to your new friends. However you say it in that language. Okay, oh my gosh, this is working so well with the bonding that's going on. But I'm on the clock, folks, so Kelly's going to cut me off. She's got a shepherd's cane to pull me off stage soon. So let's keep going.
That was great.
All right, so quick question. How many of you knew either the word or the nonverbal gestures that you were associated with? That when you assumed that persona, did you know how to use it? No. Okay, now what about the other people? Did they guess who you were, where you were from?
No.
Okay, this is it. I mean, it could even be so different. We're looking at cultural breakdowns, and this is something very basic where you're saying hello and goodbye. And you'll see on a card back there that I have how not to lose $1 million in 30 seconds. You have to communicate effectively in the outset. So that requires a bit of planning, and that's where we can lead, live, and thrive, because the more successful we are as business people in communicating, the better we feel about ourselves, the better we are at our jobs, and that comes through cross-culture intelligence. And whoops. Okay, so we've been through, we have the general idea. I'm not going to read every single one of the statistics, but with some of the things that Kelly showed us earlier, and some of the things that were discussed in the panel and so forth, we get this. There's a problem. We have all sorts of things leading up to depression and anxiety, job loss, attrition rates, high attrition rates in companies. 80% of people worldwide, from CEOs down to factory line workers, are dissatisfied with their job. I mean, we have the Great Resignation, as Kelly talked about. We have quiet quitting going on, where people are showing up and getting paid but not doing their job very effectively. And so you think of how that adversely affects the company, but what is it doing to that person who is quiet quitting? Is that time worth spent? No, it's not time worth spending at all. So what we need to do is get at this. It's hard to measure, as we were talking about at lunch, it's a little hard to measure the success of wellness programs at work, but the success comes from within, and it's qualitative, not quantitative. It's very hard to measure, okay, this is customer satisfaction, this is client satisfaction, unless you perhaps have a survey. But what you can tell is by the climate of the room. I mean, like what Jen Marie just did with us a few minutes ago, it felt so good in here. You know the success by how you feel. We're intuitive creatures as humans, and this is why we need to tap into this so that we can control our situations and the people working for us can control their situations effectively. Because, of course, the most effective leaders are the ones who breed leaders. In their breed, that's a little harsh, but you nourish, nurture, build leadership with the people that you work with, regardless of their capacity or your position in the company. So what we need to look at, if we're going to get to this level of wellness, we need to look at energy management. And we've talked a bit about mindset, adaptability, and connection. These all come together. So I want you to think about this for a minute. As you were going into the little exercise at the very beginning of this, how much of a mindset did it require to shift into the other persona? Was that something quick? What do you think, Sarah?
Oh, it takes a moment.
Yeah, it takes a moment, but you can do it, right?
You can do it, yeah.
But it took a little bit of effort.
Yep.
But not that much. And that is the point. If you work in a proactive way to adjust your mindset, then you can adapt quickly. And that is where you get the connection that you need to manage the energy and lead to the components that Kelly talked about earlier, physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So this is where we start. You start with yourself. And we've gone over this, and the panel covered this very thoroughly in terms of you need to feel well inside in order to project that. It's very easy for people who are not feeling well about themselves to bring people down. That is something that happens a heck of a lot more quickly than bringing people up. Why do you think that is? What do you think, Michaela? Michaela?
Why? Okay, wait, repeat again. Sorry.
Okay, why is it easier to bring people down than bring people up?
I feel like it's easy to, when you're in that negative mindset, to just go around and spread it because you want people to feel on that level.
Yeah.
If you're just positive and happy, you feel like you need to bring people down. You just
That's just
are
how you
that
are.
way, you don't need
Yeah,
to-
the whole misery loves company.
yeah.
Right? So you start with yourself, and then, but it's contagious. I mean, you're looking at this. I was actually watching the nonverbal communication during your exercise, and I was looking at how hesitant we were as a group starting, and we just had rather neutral expressions, but by the end of it, we were all smiling at each other, and the connection that we talked about that we had there. What was it, like 20 minutes, half hour? Yeah, so we look at what was accomplished with all of us with our various backgrounds, our various demographic differences. And this is what Jen Marie pulled off in a very short time. But it's easier to pull people down, so we need to change the direction of that. In this negative climate, this stressful climate that is affecting us worldwide, we need to be the change makers. We need to bring things onto a positive level, but it has to start with us. And that's where we become effective leaders and our workplace transforms. Because I do think that when you are positive and you deliberately share the positivity, that you make a difference. It's very hard for someone to, okay, this is just an experience. Did you just see how I smiled at India? She smiled right back at me. So, you were an easy target because you smiled all the time. So I think I could have gone through that. But anyway, let's look at the leadership dimensions. This is what I'm talking about first, this level of conscious leadership. And with conscious leadership, it's deliberate. All of your actions, of course, you're spontaneous here and there. I'm not saying that everything has to be scripted, but you need to be deliberate in order to be impactful. You think about how your actions are going to affect other people on the job and in various places. You become conscious of who you are and what you represent, and then you're able to share that. And of course, you're becoming empowered at the same time. But what the thing is, we've got to think about our world right now. We have a global economy. It's borderless in so many different ways. Of course, there are some, privacy laws in various countries and so forth that we can't get through. But we can go, I could right now be connecting with someone in Istanbul very easily, just at the click of a button. So we need to know how to make that has to be effective from the outset. And again, that goes back to planning. And that is how you act with global intelligence. And then your conversation is a success. And of course, that goes right back at you. So if you want to talk about the joy and the, it's not really selfish, but it comes right back at you. So you're sharing this positivity, and that is what we are in desperate need of. So we're looking about leadership more than strategy. It's about understanding people and cultures. And that requires a little extra work, but not that much. So let's talk about the role of cultural intelligence. So we have, IQs, the intelligent quotient. And then in the 90s, the emotional and social intelligence factor came in. And Teddy Roosevelt said, back at the turn of the last century, he said, you have to know people in order to succeed. That's how you succeed in relationships. I take it further. In order to get to that connection, you have to understand the culture. You have to develop this sort of cultural fluency in order to connect with your counterpart. And I don't care if it's in another country or another state. I'm working with a group, and again, a construction group. It's a national construction group, and they're based in Tempe, and they're doing a construction project in Oregon. And Human Resources brought in a bunch of people from Florida to work the front line, the builders and so forth. And there is such a high attrition rate with these folks, and a lot of it is because of the culture shock that goes into this transition. The Oregonians have preset ideas of what the Floridians are like and vice versa, and they're not coming together. And so this is where you need to break things down to the individual level, and that's what my recommendations were for this company, to take it to a personal level where there's some connection. We'll get more to that in just a second. But it takes a plan, it takes planning to figure out how to get people to meet together. And so I just have that statistic. We're looking at cultural misunderstandings. 50% of international ventures fail. International ventures cover a whole span of things, because I'm thinking, we all work globally, but your suppliers come from all over the world, right? You're a national construction company, but you've got suppliers from all over the world. Think of how much more effective supply chain and so forth could be if you at least had something of a concept of the culture of the various people that are contributing to your product. We can overcome this. This is something that can be very easily fixed if we master new ways to communicate with people. But in order to do that, we have to take a look at ourselves first. We have to look at our culture. So right now, I want you at your table to give 3 descriptors. They can be adjectives or they can be a tradition, something that identifies your culture. Do that right now with each other. 3 things. 3 things quickly. This is like hot potato, go fast. 3 things that make you.
It's probably easier for you.
That represent your culture.
3 things that define your
Okay, you know what? This is funny because I'm looking at this, and this is kind of the point that I wanted to make. You can say some things, but it's hard too.
work, responsibility.
Quite an adjustment coming here after
I also don't want to piggyback because that's like what
Yeah.
defines me, or like
assimilated well.
music, values.
That makes sense. People like to be like that. Or how they like to be. Yeah. So I feel like
Okay, so as you look at culture, it's funny because now you are talking about your culture and it's coming more easily, but it's hard to identify immediately because culture is everything. It's who we are. It's the reason that we act the way that we do. It's the reason, look around. I was looking around while you were talking, and look at the tables. You've all got about the same personal space barrier between you. And barrier or door, I don't know what you want to, anyway, the culture, the space is pretty much. So you look at this, there's something shared. This is a culture that is, probably a bias to our country. And then if you look at, for example, if you're in Italy and you're doing business, which I have done, we could be, and it's so uncomfortable for me because you're doing business like this, and that's after greetings. I didn't see anyone kissing each other on the cheeks. or le bis, as it's called in France, where you greet each other with the cheek kisses. It's just something that we have to adapt to, and knowing about it going into it. In fact, this just reminded me of something my mother-in-law said when I was in New York, where they had migrated to. She warned me, coming from the Western United States, she said, when you meet people, they're going to kiss you. Turn your cheek so that they don't get your lips. And that was a great, she was spot on too, because when I grabbed her my cheek, wow, just planted one on me if I didn't want it, you know. But whatever. So the thing of it is, if we take steps to look at where people are coming from, we know how to position ourselves. And that is where we succeed, and that is where we do well. But you think about it, you're not going to get it right all the time. Never. We screw things up in our own culture. But the point is, if you're making an effort to do this, it makes all the difference. So let me give you another example. When I was in France several years ago, I was staying with some friends of ours that were expatriates, and they were working for a foreign subsidiary. And the husband he lived in France for 2 years. He majored in French, minored in business, and they had 2 children. And his wife was my friend, and she knew French quite well, and she was so excited about the move. So we'll bracket that for a second. But when I went there, I asked our friend John, I said, okay, give me some tips as I go interact in this society. And he did. He told me how to say bonjour, and please excuse my pronunciation because I'm still massacring it this many years later. But when you walk into a shop, or you at least make the effort, or say, je suis désolé before you ask something so you don't come across as the arrogant American. And how to take these little tiny steps so that you don't kill deals in that amount of time. Well, another friend of ours came along with me, and I did a little, because this is how I am, I did a little sociological experiment with the 2 of us. And we'd walk into shops, she just said, they can speak English. And so there was this arrogance and ego, pride that comes in. If they want my money, they can talk to me. And she didn't go through the bonjour thing. I'm like, how hard is that? But I kind of distanced myself from her when we walk into shops. And I was just watching how people reacted so differently. And by anticipating what's going to happen, you can build cultural intelligence. And you can also learn by the same token. So here was my mistake. When I was doing the research for my book back there, my daughters and I went to Normandy, and we were, my daughters who are in their 20s, and when they both speak French quite well. One of them is almost fluent, but anyway, so I thought, we have this, I study French every time I go over there, and then I forget, and I hear people talking, and I'm like, je ne comprends pas. But, so I thought we had it set. And I had been in Paris, I had taught in Paris, I had worked in Paris several times. So I thought, we're set. We drove to the north of France, and we had an electric car that did not carry a charge. And to make this story a little bit shorter, we wound up, it was completely dark in the French countryside, no battery, just stars, no moon that night. We couldn't see anything. We were in one of those places, when you're like in a horror movie, and you're like, don't go that way. Don't go that way to the only building that was there. And anyway, we couldn't, it was very hard because you can always use, in Paris and so many places, you can use English as a fallback. Or at least, a broken conversation of some sort. Not so in Normandy. So even my daughters who speak French far better than I do, we were having a hard time communicating. And, as we were walking along this dark country road and coming across people saying that our car is out of, electricity. Until this cute kid, Enzo, on his scooter, 17-year-old, helped us out. But anyway, so we got out of that. But the point is, I hadn't taken adequate preparation, and I was doing the research for that book at the time, although I've been doing it for 30 years. And I was unprepared, and had it not been for Enzo, who knows where we would have wound up that night. And my daughters doing what they can, and Google Translate. And this is one of the great things about technology. We can use it, but it can only get us so far. If we create new ways of understanding by recognizing patterns of behavior, we don't necessarily Brothers went to a conference in New York, and he was seated at a table by bankers. And, he's a very bright man. He's vice president. And he was sitting there and he said, I did not understand a single word. So, they were all speaking the same language, but it was such a different context in such a different industry, and he had not prepared. But then he started listening to the banker terminology, brought it with his set of knowledge, and he was able to do this. So with my culture spin method, as a university professor of almost 30 years, plus working around the world, I've come up with this 4-step situation where you can read a situation. And the first one is self and situation, and I've been talking about that. You look at yourself, you think of your bias, your predisposition. So I'm just going to say this. We're going to do this really quickly. It's an association thing. I want you to picture someone right off the bat in I want you to think about what they look like, who they are in your mind immediately. So, okay, a line cook, a French chef, a construction worker, a hospital administrator, a Wall Street investment banker. Did a certain picture, a certain gender come to mind? And a certain age, certain attitudes? So you think about this, and you're like, okay, I'm going into this situation where I'm going to be meeting with bankers. Am I going to be meeting with, whatever the avatar is in your head? Check it out. It's so easy to check it out ahead of time. And look at what your stereotype is doing. Is it helping or hurting the situation? And then at the same time, think about the stereotype that is coming back on you. They see you coming from a different place. What are the assumptions that they're going to make about you? And then you can take it to the next level, which is profile and plan. And this is like FBI profiling. You think of the population that you're going to, the people with whom you're going to interact, and how you can make the best of the situation. You think about that, and then you're ready for the, where it really starts to get fun, the impact and immersion. This is where you think about, okay, these are the people with whom I'm going to meet. These are the executives that I'm going to be meeting with, and I happen to know from, because this is we can do social stalkery here. You know that you met with someone who is a skier, and you may be meeting with her, and you would say, oh, I ski too, and point to, or whatever. There's some commonality. That is where you find impact, and you work on your strengths here. You know your weaknesses, but you have others turn your strengths, your weaknesses rather, to strengths that way. So if you're a foodie, you focus on that. Okay, let's see how we're going to do food in this place. Let's not go to the hotel and have food. Let's ask the bartender where he goes to eat. Or let's ask let's ask someone who is not in a concierge or a position to drive you to the more common places, so that you can really immerse yourself, but in a way that matters. When I go somewhere new, I don't care, in this country, other countries, I walk around all the time, and that is the best way to immerse yourself, because you see people in their day-to-day actions. And it's so easy to talk to people. And you think about it, this law of reciprocity that we went over with just a minute ago with the smiling. If you take the first step, you're inviting interaction in a positive way. And it's a way of giving and getting back at the same time. And then you have the next level now. This is where it becomes transformative on both personal and professional levels. When I was speaking to Rick Steves, familiar with him? Okay, we were talking about the responsibility of travel. And one thing he said, I think it applies to whatever privileged position you happen to be in. And he said, okay, you're privileged when you travel. Therefore, we have a responsibility to share our experience with people. We need to impact the people when we come home. We need to leave a positive footprint where we've been. And so this is where you plan. Again, all of this requires pre-planning. How is it going to change you? How are you going to affect change? How are you going to take whatever you've learned at the conference or whatever it was and help the people within your company grow? What difference will it make for you on a personal level to make your work easy? Now, one of the quickest ways one of the first steps, because I won't get into the whole spin method, but one of the first things you can do is a cultural Venn diagram. And you can see how that is spelled out there, because it's my contention that it doesn't matter who you talk to on the planet, anyone, anywhere, there's something that overlaps with that particular person. Even if it comes down to the fact that we just have blood flowing through our systems, there's a commonality, and you can build outward from that. And as you're doing that, you are extending this process where you can build a cultural bridge to fill the gap. And as you take the first step, invoke the law of reciprocity, you're getting what I call your 3 fundamental reasons for, rights rather, for just being human. We all want to belong, we all crave respect, and we all deserve dignity. So this is the first step that you take to establishing that as your playbook. And this is where you come to the concepts of trust, dignity, and respect. It opens the door for that when you start the bridge. And then you edit it. And I want to just touch on a couple of these. I have actually a worksheet that I've written that I can give you examples of how to actually implement this at your workplace if you want. But this is where we can borrow from various cultures. We can look at some of the mindful practices that go into some of the business practices in Japan. We can look at community focus and work-life balance by looking at some of the Latin American or African countries. We can look at purpose-driven work by looking at companies that are driven by certain concepts in Europe that look for this work balancing and how they look at time. And when I was in Paris speaking to someone about working patterns, she's an executive, and she said, in Paris, we work to live, and we live to work, and in the US, you guys work to live. And so it's interesting, we can borrow from other cultures to make work a better place and to feel better about ourselves in general. But we have to be ready to step out of our comfort zones and expand as much as we possibly can. Look for the possibilities. Are we going to like everything? No, not at all. But we can change perception, bias, and judgment when we think of the exchange process that goes on with dealing with people from other cultures. Regardless of what the culture is. It could be even someone from a different religion or something. Let's look at how we connect versus disconnect so that we can all become empowered by growing interpersonal relationships to our strength. And the first thing, always take an honest inventory. And one other thing, that I should have had on there is give the benefit of the doubt to the person. Always give them the advantage that you would like to be given. And then you're able to shift from this tunnel vision experience, and you're a culturally agile person. And eventually, you develop cultural fluency, which is built on cultural courage. Think of yourselves in a childlike stage. Kids are looking at that. They're always looking around. What is it? They're picking up things. When does our curiosity shut down? We need to have the courage to inquire. We need to have the courage to act on our natural instincts to find out more about a situation. And that is when we're acting with courage, and cultural courage particularly in this. So be childlike in that and act. I love that picture of the girl with the bug. She doesn't care that anyone's looking, she's just interested in the bug. She's not worried about how she looks or whatever. But anyway, these are the things that we can come to. Eventually, you, through the development of cross-cultural intelligence, you become competent, agile, fluent, and you're able to act in a way that makes you a better person, and it's just like a stone dropping in the pond. The people around you become better. So, that is why I say always discover the human side of business when you are learning to work with cultural intelligence, rather. That's the transformation that we